Welcome here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on WakeUpCallDT.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on MixLR.com/WakeUpCallDT. Proud to be here with you, hanging out inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios, Cafe Kubal, and you know how it is. Grateful for pumpkin spice, and the pumpkin spice chai DT special is available exclusively at Cafe Kubal. You can go to any one of their locations and get my pumpkin spice chai on 343 Fayette Street, their new location in Manlius that just opened over this past weekend. And a week going into Christmas on December 18th. You can go there and get it. You can also go to 401 South Salina Street, 324 West Water Street, 208 North Townsend Street, and 3501 James Street. So make sure you make your way over there to Cafe Kubal. You're also watching here on Facebook Live on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT, and I hope you're having yourselves a terrific morning. Happy Christmas week, holiday week, whatever you want to call it. Happy Christmas and happy holidays, a Merry Christmas and happy holidays, a happy anything that you're celebrating out there. I hope you're having yourselves a fantastic day and being good to one another. Ross said, have a great show, buddy, and happy holidays. Same to you, my brother. So happy holidays and a Merry Christmas to every single person out there hanging out, enjoying life, making the most of it. We have a jam-packed week because we're going to be off for Christmas Eve and off for Christmas because my boss is really nice and he's going to give me the couple days off. Ow. So I'm very happy to say that we will be relaxing on Christmas Eve and Christmas, just hanging out with the family around the tree and having a good time with mom and dad and the crew. So I do want to let you know that though we are going to shorten the week here Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then be off Thursday and Friday, shout out to my guy Dave Brooks. Come on, Dan. So miss you, brother. Hope to get to see you soon. So jam-packed show this week, and we're going to cram the entire 5 days into 3. So even though we're going to be off for Christmas Eve and Christmas, it's going to be like you missed absolutely nothing because I'm not going to let it happen. So the ingredients to success will be on Tuesday, brought to you by Avicoli's per always. And we will have a fantasy football power hour with Mike Sofka on Wednesday per always in the second hour. But Papa Joe is going to move from Thursday in the first hour to Wednesday. The annoying moment of the week is going to move to today, and then the top dog of the week, as well as a lead with Juanita Ward, Learn, Evolve, Adlib, and Deliver is all going to find its way earlier on in the week. And so we have a lot of great stuff coming up. Gary Stokin, the president and CEO of Peach Bowl Inc., that oversees the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl and the Chick-fil-A kickoff game, as well as so much more in the community. He is going to be joining us this week to speak on Cincinnati, Georgia, coming to play in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So a lot of good stuff. Gene Waldron's going to be with me in an expanded edition of Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. You know that we are here Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Eastern Time during our regularly scheduled broadcasts on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT and on MixLR.com/WakeUpCallDT. This Wednesday, we're going to add another show. On Wednesday, December 23rd, it's going to be Christmas Come Early, as Gene and I will join you for a Christmas broadcast from the Wildcat Sports Pub on 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York, where we will be speaking on Syracuse basketball, coming right off of their game at home against Notre Dame, which is happening this Tuesday. So we'll see you out there at the Wildcat on 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York, this Wednesday, December 23rd at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And leading all up into that, we're going to have a fantastic week of shows. Like I said, everything from Thursday and Friday will be moved into the first 3 days this week because I will not allow you to miss anything with us being off for Christmas Eve and Christmas. So we're going to make it all happen in a shorter amount of time because I love you and because I appreciate you so very much. Gene says he can't wait. I can't wait either, brother. Come out and see Gene Waldron and I. Put your mask on, get some wings, grab a drink, have some fun at the Wildcat. We want to celebrate Christmas and the holidays with you. So make sure you come out and see us at the Wildcat, 3680 Milton Avenue in Camillus, New York, this Wednesday, December 23rd at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Gene and I will be sitting there having a Christmas show and holiday show special speaking on Syracuse basketball this season. So if you want to talk about the Orange, want to get out of the house for a little bit, come over and not having the in-laws in or not having anybody over for Christmas this year and things being different, well, come see Gene and I. We'll brighten up your spirits. We'll do the best we can and give you something to smile about, laugh about, and have a good time about, and then we'll send you on your way for the Christmas festivities. So thank you to the Wildcat, thank you to Gene, and thank you for all the love, everybody. We look forward to seeing you out there, God willing. So with all that being stated, we have an awesome, awesome show set up for you today. A lot of great stuff coming up. I have so much going on in my head, and there's so many things I want to talk about and what I want to do because it's a great week of shows. So I cannot be happier to be inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios. Mon Pa's Kettle Corn and Popcorn Factory proudly bringing what's poppin' every single broadcast in the morning of Wake Up Call. Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, is going to be joining us first, and he's going to be speaking with us coming off of the decision of the College Football Playoff Committee to not only not choose Cincinnati in the College Football Playoff, but to give the same reasoning why they chose Ohio State and then not choosing Cincinnati, and they're in the same state, and Ohio State played half the season that Cincinnati plays. So we got a lot to talk with Mike Aresco about the College Football Playoff Committee, what works, what doesn't work, what needs to change, where are things at, what does the head of the American Athletic Conference think about the fact that the American Athletic never honestly even gets thought of for this, and the fact that Cincinnati, by not making it, wasn't even given the 5th ranking. They were dropped down the list substantially, in my opinion, multiple spots. They were behind the Texas A&M, which I can understand, but being behind Oklahoma with 2 losses is ridiculous. So we'll talk about all of that with Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic, in just a little while. He is going to give us a conversation that I can only imagine people all around the world are going to want to hear. So very excited that Mike's going to be with me this morning at 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time. And in the second hour of the show, we'll be joined by Cincinnati and Tulsa. Cincinnati will be joined by their players and their team. Very, very excited. Cole, as well as Desmond and Derek, will all be joining us here today on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora from Cincinnati, including their head coach Luke Fickell, and we'll also be joined by Tulsa's head coach Philip Montgomery, as well as Trayvon and Corey will all be joining us here on the broadcast today. So plenty of video Q&As and audio Q&As you're going to be able to watch and listen to, and of course Mike Aresco you're going to be able to hear in just a little bit. But I cannot have this conversation with Mike Aresco without first bringing in early this week, bringing it in a few days early because it is so very fitting. The annoying moment of the week coming to you now. We're not going to wait until the end of the week to bring you the annoying moment because the annoying moment of this week, quite frankly, happened already. So let's jump into the annoying moment of the week. Proudly presented by Carvel DeWitt, 4322 East Genesee Street in DeWitt, New York. It is what happy tastes like.
Tortora proudly brings you... Is that for real? Are you kidding me? The annoying moment of the week. I really, honestly, I don't know how to respond to this. Presented by Carvel DeWitt, 4322 East Genesee Street. It's what happy tastes like. You have to be that crazy. I guess so.
This week's annoying moment of the week, proudly presented by Carvel DeWitt, 4322 East Genesee Street in DeWitt, New York. It is what happy tastes like. My annoying moment of the week is the College Football Playoff Committee in general. They are my annoying moment of the week. Why? Because they show, you think that there's favoritism, you wonder if there's favoritism, you find out that there's favoritism, but the thing is, who is going to stop the favoritism? Who is going to call an end to what's going on? Nobody, right? Nobody. It feels like that. It feels like it's a lose, 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 lose battle. Now, granted, and let me be clear about this, I do believe that Alabama and Clemson are the best teams in the country. I do believe that they're going to see each other when all is said and done. That's reality. But speaking on teams that deserve a shot, teams that should be there, Texas A&M got completely disrespected, and Cincinnati got disrespected and treated like UCF. They tell you got to win your games. They tell you that you have to, command your conference. You got to be ranked. You got to do this. You got to do that. But here's the thing. The College Football Playoff Committee can put a team up when they're down. I've seen teams rise when they lose. I've seen teams fall when they win. Cincinnati continued to fall while they were winning. Continued to fall when they weren't playing, when they couldn't play. So, you talk about, well, we don't want to punish Ohio State. Well, you punish Cincinnati. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. You punish one, you help another. It doesn't make any sense. You say the reasons for bringing in one, and those are the same things achieved by the other, but you don't talk about it. And when asked a direct question about why not Cincinnati, what does the chairman of the College Football Playoff say? Well, we just didn't think they were there based on what we were looking at. What were you looking at? What were you looking at? Tell us what you were looking at. What Cincinnati, UCF, Texas A&M, I'm talking about UCF of a couple of years ago, obviously not this year. But what these teams need is clarification. What do they need to do that they're not doing? Because the reality of it all is if the college football playoff was created for equality, if it was created to give everybody a fair shot, well, it's not giving anybody a fair shot except for a select few. So if this was built to only help a few, then it is no better than the BCS. It is essentially the BCS still. So it's my annoying moment of the week, and I'm coming for you, the College Football Playoff Committee, because of the fact that this is just offensive at this point. It's ridiculous, it's disrespectful, it's wrong, and it begs the question, why even play a football season? Why even try? Why even try? And if you put that in the hearts and the minds of the kids, that's not going to create anything good. So with that being stated, we're going to take a step aside. We're going to come back with Mike Aresco. We're going to try and sift through all of this because I'm sure he's upset. And we have a lot to talk about. So that's all coming up where sports meets life after this fast break. The annoying moment of the week this week, proudly presented by Carvel DeWitt, goes to the College Football Playoff Committee for showing us your true colors and showing us that what's good for another team isn't good for the other team. And that it's okay to make decisions that make no sense as long as you got nobody to question you. And even if you have someone to question you, you can just sit in your chair and do absolutely nothing about it. The College Football Playoff Committee, once again, has let the nation down. Congratulations. We'll take a step aside for a fast break. We'll be back right after this.
Carvel DeWitt, it's what happy tastes like. Do you know why? Because we make ice cream. Creamy, rich, flavorful ice cream. Not yogurt or iced milk like some of our competitors. Ice cream. Fresh, by hand, daily. For the calorie conscious, we have something new for you. Our new Carvelite. Same great flavor, creaminess, and texture of our regular ice cream with only 35 calories an ounce. So whether you want an ice cream cake, flying saucer, dasher, carvalanche, hard or soft ice cream, we will satisfy your craving with our fresh, handmade regular or new Carvelite ice cream. Carvel DeWitt. It's what happy tastes like.
Cafe Cabal offers same-day local delivery of our products, offering no delivery charge for Onondaga County. Shop cafecabal.com for fresh roasted coffee beans, cold brew, travel mugs, and all your essential Cafe Cabal needs. Cafe Cabal, coffee for the soul.
The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is located on 3680 Milton Avenue in the Home Depot Plaza. It is your family-friendly sports bar and restaurant. Folks, some sports bars aren't family-friendly. Some family-friendly restaurants are not sports bars. The Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus, New York is proud to be both.
It is that marriage that you've been looking for years. The Wildcat Sports Pub is your home base for your sports bar and restaurant needs, games for the kids, indoor and outdoor activities, and enough things on the menu to come back every single week and get to try something new. They're open Sundays from noon to 8 p.m., Monday through Wednesday, 11 a.m. to 11 p.m., and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to midnight. For reservations and party information, call 315-487-2222 for the Wildcat family-friendly sports pub and restaurant.
Welcome back here to Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora on WakeUpCallDT.com, your one-stop sports shop, and on MixLR.com/WakeUpCallDT. Of course, on Facebook Live, on Facebook.com/LiveNowDT, all inside of the Cafe Kubal Studios. Cafe Kubal, coffee for the soul. New location on 343 Fayette Street in Manlius, and of course, there are 4 locations in Syracuse. And I am grateful for pumpkin spice this morning, as my pumpkin spice chai DT special is available exclusively at Cafe Kubal. So with that being stated, plenty coming up here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora. I'm on PausPopcorn.com's What's Poppin' here for you. Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, is going to be joining me in just a few minutes. And of course, we're going to hear in hour number 2 from Cincinnati as well as Tulsa. Very excited to have Cincinnati and Tulsa representation on the show. Those of you watching on Facebook Live are going to be able to see my videos with them, so be able to see their faces and get their reactions and whatnot as we do a little Q&A. And so you'll be able to see that. And then those of you listening on MixLR.com/WakeUpCallDT will obviously be able to hear those Q&As, as I have a lot of great ones coming up here, thanks to the American Athletic Conference, thanks to Tulsa, and thanks to Cincinnati for taking the time. Very excited for the players that I'll be able to share with you in just a little bit. Trayvon Reeves will be joining me, a linebacker from Tulsa, will be joining the show. So very excited to have Trayvon Reeves on the broadcast, and also to have the running back of the team on the broadcast as well. Very much looking forward to bringing, for the first time ever, onto the broadcast, Corey Taylor II. He'll be on from Tulsa, and of course the head coach, Philip Montgomery. And then from the Cincinnati Bearcats, we'll have head coach Luke Fickell, who has been building something great there since coming over from Ohio State, where he was an assistant coach. He'll be joined by Derek Forrest, a safety on Cincinnati, will be joining us, as well as Desmond Ritter, their quarterback, and their kicker will be joining the show as well, who hit the game-winning field goal that separated it 27-24 as time expired to give Cincinnati their first ever American Athletic Championship trophy. Cole Smith will be joining the show as well. So you'll be able to see all those Q&As in hour number 2, and that'll be coming after my conversation here with Mike Aresco of the American Athletic Conference. So very happy to have Mike coming on in just a few moments here as we get set and ready to go. I know he has a busy schedule. I'm more than sure of that, with everything having gone on with the American Athletic Conference recently here, and trying to sift through all of this and figure this out and see where to go from here as the American Athletic Conference continues to be disrespected by the College Football Playoff Committee. And I do want to go to the rankings while we have a second here to kind of continue the annoying moment of the week, proudly brought to you by Carvel DeWitt, since the annoying moment of the week is the exact conversation that we're going to be having with Mike Aresco on the fact that the College Football Playoff Committee, again, just continues to look over the American Athletic Conference. So it's just sad. It's sad, it's ridiculous, and it's very, very unfortunate, but this is what the College Football Playoff has been all about. You know, they obviously have shown their true colors. They take care of who they want to take care of, and the American Athletic Conference is always on the outside looking in. Again, let me be clear. I believe Alabama and Clemson are the best teams in the nation. but I don't believe Ohio State, who's played half the games, can be regarded as higher. And Notre Dame just got absolutely embarrassed by Clemson. And now I think if that's the case, if they're going to get embarrassed by Clemson, I more than believe they're also going to be. I mean, it stands to make a lot of sense that Alabama's going to wreck them too. So people would say to me, well, Dan, wouldn't Alabama wreck Cincinnati? Wouldn't they do this? Wouldn't they do that? You know what? I'd at least like to see it be played. Washington made it to the college football playoff and was completely embarrassed by Alabama. But guess what? They got to make it out of the Pac-12. Ohio State laid a goose egg against Clemson in the college football playoff. But guess what? They got to make it out of the Big Ten. Good morning to Jerry. I hope you're doing well, sir. So, you look at these things. If you can't score less than 0, and if blowouts have already happened, you look at Clemson blowing out Alabama, blowing out Notre Dame last year. So the reality of it all is Notre Dame has been embarrassed in the college football playoff, but they're still in it. Ohio State's been embarrassed in the college football playoff. They're still in it. You know what I mean? Washington's been embarrassed, but the Pac-12 still has a better chance in the American Athletic, most people would think. So it's just unfortunate that this conference, and it's not about banging a drum and trying to make sense of something that doesn't make any sense. It's reality, okay? When the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee says to the camera in the moment, bang, right here after he chooses the top 4, when they say, why did you choose Ohio State? He says, well, we looked at these things. They won their conference championship. They went undefeated. And they beat 2 ranked teams. Guess what, brother? Cincinnati, located in the same state, won their conference championship. Went undefeated, but played more games. And beat 2 ranked teams. When you look at the schedule of Ohio State, it doesn't make any sense. But with that being said, we have Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, here with us, and we'll be continuing that discussion on the college football playoff that we have started already here this morning. With that being said, let's bring him in. Mike, how you doing today?
Good morning, Dan. How you doing? Hope all's well.
I'm doing well, and Mike, I know that to say that you're waking up this morning frustrated, confused, and probably not any of the good emotions. I can more than understand that. I feel it watching this. I feel it for Cincinnati. I feel it for Texas A&M. So I'm kind of just going to broad scope open the door this morning and say, what was your initial reaction to the decision by the committee to include the teams that they chose? Alabama, Clemson obviously makes sense, but to choose Notre Dame, choose as well Ohio State, meaning that Cincinnati was left off the board.
Yeah, Dan, and thanks for letting me, discuss it. The issue, it's not about denigrating any teams. You want to first say that. I don't. It's not a question of criticizing other teams. It's a question of fairness and trying to compare resumes and determining whether a team like Cincinnati, should have a shot and whether it really did have any reasonable shot. Now, the last few weeks have been extremely frustrating for us because we thought Cincinnati was in a position poised to make a leap, right? And had they been ranked where we thought they should have been, which is probably 5, to be honest, when I look at these other teams, and I see an undefeated Cincinnati, and this is our third, Dan, undefeated team in 4 years in this conference that has played a representative schedule, did everything asked of them. And a couple of things trouble me. One, Notre Dame has had a good season. They had the win over Clemson. But, again, in the old BCS, people were, critical because, for example, at the end of one season, Nebraska lost to Colorado 65-35. And then another time, Oklahoma lost to Kansas State 35-7. And they still got into the national championship game, and people felt that those results should have been, a disqualifier. Now, you can look at Notre Dame and you can say, okay, they've now been, soundly defeated by Clemson, which had its full team. It had its defensive players back. It had its quarterback. Do they, not being undefeated, do they deserve to be in? I don't know. Let's leave that up. It's a reasonable debate, okay? And now, would I like to see an undefeated Cincinnati there instead? Yes. And do I think they can play with those teams? Absolutely. Then I really have an issue. You have Ohio State playing 6 games, all of 6 games, 5 regular season games, and not against what you would call stellar competition. I think probably 4 of those 6 teams had a losing record, and the other 2, while they're good teams, nobody would argue that they are powerhouses, and they struggled with the 2 teams that actually have good records, and yet they're in because of their brand and their name. And it troubles me that you can play that few games, and they decided to do that, and people say, well, don't penalize them because of the pandemic. Well, then it's not a question of penalizing them, but why are you penalizing teams that played the full season and were undefeated and endured an entire season, risked losing more, risked injury, risked wear and tear, had to deal with the pandemic the entire season, and someone else can start up that being essentially late October, beginning of November, miss 3 of their 8 games, and yet every week when Cincinnati missed a couple of games at the end, they were dropped each time. Think about that, and then you get into somebody like A&M, which is a nice team, but struggled to beat Vanderbilt. Lost to Alabama, gave up 52 points. Well, okay, why not give Cincinnati a shot to see if they can give up fewer than 52 points? I mean, they do have a terrific defense, and again, I think that that's a legitimate question. And then you have the really egregious situations that I think shows where this committee is coming from, unfortunately, and that is you have. It seems like they took the opportunity every week to jump somebody above Cincinnati. And, whether it was Iowa State, which made no sense to me, losing by 17 points at home. And then once they lose their championship game, the team that beats them, which also has 2 losses, including one to Kansas State, and you can check Kansas State's record this year, which also lost to Arkansas State, which was beaten soundly. Arkansas State was beaten soundly by our Memphis team. If you look at that situation, then Oklahoma jumps over Cincinnati. In addition, you had Florida ahead of Cincinnati. They lose to a team that was 3-5 at the time, completely depleted, LSU, and they don't drop more than 1 spot. And then they play Alabama. They give up 50 points. Yes, they ended up making it a close game, but they lost again. So they have 3 losses now, and they're still ahead of an undefeated Cincinnati. And you say to yourself, this team, really, Cincinnati, wasn't respected by the committee, despite what they say, and they can say whatever they want. But clearly, that's just it's almost patronizing. Yeah, we respect Cincinnati, nice team, but see you fellas, and that's sort of where you are. You don't really have, and there are 2 aspects to this that I think are worth mentioning. One is the G5 business. I think the G5 teams should have a better shot at this, not just us. But I do think we've been separated as a conference, and I think that's not really accepted by the committee. They say the right things to us, but this conference has done really, really well. And this conference is in many respects, like a P5, and we just don't have the branding right now. This is now our 6th New Year's Day game in 8 years. The first one we still had the automatic bid back in 2013, but even if we hadn't, UCF would have gotten it at 11-1 or whatever they were, and ended up 12-1 when they soundly beat Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl, and Baylor had ripped their way through the Big 12. And here this year, the Big 12 is getting all this respect, but they had the 3 losses to the Sun Belt early in the season. No one's arguing this has been a stellar season for the Big 12. And incidentally, Tulsa, even without Zaven Collins in the second half because he was cramping up, was leading Oklahoma State at the half and went ahead of them late in the game and had a penalty, a motion penalty, and it cost them the touchdown. It would have given them the lead. They missed a short field goal, and then it was 13-7 at the very end. They had a last drive, and they unfortunately shot themselves in the foot. And I think they again, they had issues with COVID before they could play. As you know, that game was postponed a week, and Zaven Collins again was cramping up in the second half. He was a terror in the first half. I think he had 8 tackles. So Oklahoma State was competitive with everybody in the Big 12, as you know, and at one point they had a chance to win it. And here's Tulsa, our team, playing them dead even on the road, and easily could have won the game. That's a very good Tulsa team. And its offense improved as the season went on. So the fact that they gave Cincinnati a good game is no surprise. It's a big, tough, physical team. They play terrific defense. They can run the ball. Their quarterback, when you saw him make some throws that really made a difference in that game in very bad conditions, really unfortunate conditions for everyone, but that happens. But Cincinnati gets no credit for that. And in our league, again, this is now the 5th time in this G5 lottery, really, where we played on New Year's Day because we've had the best team. And we don't get credit, I think, for being a really competitive conference. When Cincinnati played a lot of those teams they played this year, they were either in the top 25 or they had been in the top 25. And, not everyone stays there, and people get hit by injuries and other things. Also, Cincinnati's 9-0. They played a full season. Yes, they missed a couple of games at the end. They ran into the COVID trouble that everybody's had. But when you compare, their resume, I think it stands up. And I just think this is evidence that it looked like the committee took every opportunity to jump a team over them every time somebody won. Every time somebody won a game. And they made a big fuss about the 2 wins that Iowa State had. And I watched the championship games. I didn't see anything special, Dan. I watched the parts of the Northwestern Ohio State game, and I watched parts of the Iowa State Oklahoma game, and then I watch our game, and I don't see any difference. I really don't. So again, I think it's a question of you now have to philosophically look at this. And the committee, by the way, it clearly doubled down. Despite the massive criticism it got the last 2 weeks, and it was unanimous pretty much, it was almost universal, and it was massive, they doubled down. They did the same thing they were doing the previous weeks. Oklahoma wins a close game over Iowa State, which didn't belong where they were, with the 2 losses, one at home by 17 points, and Oklahoma's got 2 losses, including one to Kansas State, and they end up ahead of Cincinnati. It was like, let's take every opportunity to put any team that wins, because it has a P5 name and it plays in what Pat Forty calls the P5 echo chamber, just playing each other. Let's put them ahead of Cincinnati. And that's really the crux of it. I think, you could argue about other aspects of this and whether, they're paying enough attention to our teams. And look, you could make a case that Coastal Carolina should have been higher. You could make a case for Louisiana being higher. They're the ones that beat Iowa State at their place. It also comes down to why play the games. Why do you play the games if you don't care about the results? If you just say, well, yeah, that team beat the other team, but we just think the team they beat is better. What's the point? What is the point of playing the games? This is about competition. This is about, upward mobility. This is about having a chance to prove it on the field. And here it's, even Notre Dame may have been, blasted out of the building by Clemson, but we think they're good. And yet, their resume, while it's good, they did play. Again, the schedule, if you look at a lot of the teams they played, our teams, Cincinnati would beat every one of those teams. And Cincinnati would have beaten every team, I believe, that Ohio State played. And Cincinnati has a 9-0 record, and Cincinnati has an elite defense that a little rust because of the layoff. I don't think there's much question about that. And by the way, that's probably something the committee has given P5 teams a lot of benefit of the doubt, as you know. He didn't have this player, or the body clock thing one year, remember, and other things. But in our case, our teams never get that benefit. And if Cincinnati had lost, they'd have dropped 6 or 8 spots. Florida can lose 2 straight games, and yes, one of them is against Alabama. I get that, but so what? You still got to win your games, and they don't drop virtually at all. So I think, again, we've talked about double standards. I think it's reached a tipping point, but what concerns me is the committee doubled down. They just don't care about what I think is legitimate criticism about what they're doing. And the chair's explanations are unsatisfying. I don't think this situation is defensible. And I'll say, I'm not afraid to say it. It's not a playoff. You can call it what you want, but it's a P5 invitational, and it involves the same teams pretty much every year because we think they're the best teams. We just happen to think, because of Ohio State's brand and Ohio State's name, that they can play 5 regular season games, 4 of them against competition that any of our teams would have beaten in all likelihood this year. This is not the normal Big Ten. You know that. It's not a normal Penn State team without Micah Parsons and some of the people that opted out. Whether it's Nebraska, whether it's others. In fact, Cincinnati would have had a shot at Nebraska, and I would have loved to have seen that. Cincinnati was really looking forward to that. They were able to schedule Army, and Army did not score an offensive touchdown. And Army is a good team, 9-2, I believe, this year. But, so Dan, again, I appreciate your show always gives me a chance to talk about, this, and you're up to speed on everything. And, it's been a hectic period for us. We're doing what we can, but the frustrating part is you just don't seem to be able to get through to this committee. And by the way, this isn't new. We've dealt with this for years and years now. We dealt with it with Houston back in 2015 when they were ranked 18th and they were 10-0, and they had how many players that they put into the NFL? 27 players when they played Temple on the field, between Temple and Houston, who are now in the NFL, and their names like Tyler Matakevich and Hassan Reddick and William Jackson and Landon Roberts of Houston and Greg Ward of Houston and all the other great players that they had. And they were ranked 18th. I don't even know what their final ranking was. And then in 2000, they did lose a game to UConn when Greg Ward didn't play. They kept him out on purpose because they needed him for Navy the following week. We had a really strong conference that year, as we do now. We had 3 undefeated teams at one point: Temple, Memphis, and Houston. You remember Memphis beating Ole Miss after Ole Miss had beaten Alabama. And in that year, when Clemson lost to Syracuse, shocking loss, remember, a few years ago?
Yep.
Nothing happened. Ended up in the playoff. In Houston's case, you drop out of sight. Even though Houston had a terrific year, a really good team. In 2017, you had the great undefeated team, UCF. They never got higher than 12. And in 2018, when Mackenzie Milton was playing, obviously losing him at the end hurt. But they were they may have made it to 8. I don't know. I don't know if they ever got as high as 6. But the point is, they were never in a position to be in the playoff. Even Paul Feinbaum, and Paul's an old friend of mine, and he's a great guy, and he's been nice enough to give me a forum, as you know, which helped ignite this debate, as you know, a couple of weeks ago when I was on his show. Even Paul, who had pretty much been skeptical initially, and Paul's got an open mind, said, look, if this team can do it again, because it's playing P5 teams, it's got good competition in a good league, then put them in the playoff. But the committee had no intention of doing that, even though, they were undefeated a second straight year. Now, granted, the committee, was let off the hook because when Mackenzie got hurt, it wasn't the same team. But let's say he hadn't been. Would they still have been in the playoff? I doubt it, based on where they had him ranked. So this is not new. This has been going on. What's happened this year is you have a perfect storm. The decisions have been so obvious and so egregious. The Iowa State thing shocked everyone. Cincinnati didn't play a game. They only missed 2 games. Ohio State had played 1 game since November 21st and played a grand total of 5 games. You don't see Ohio State dropping. You didn't see A&M drop when they didn't have a game this week, or a week ago, rather. You didn't see Florida drop when they had their COVID issues, and I think they missed a couple of games. Whether they made them up or not, I don't even know. point is, other teams had these issues all season, and they didn't drop. But Cincinnati, yes, let's drop them. Let's put a 2-loss team ahead of them, even if that 2-loss team. If we had a loss to Kansas State with their record this year, do you think Cincinnati would be in anybody's conversation? No. Do you think if they lost 17 points at home to Louisiana, they would be in anybody's conversation? Do you think if they lost to a 3-5 LSU team that was completely depleted, playing a quarterback who had never even played, do you think that they would have stayed where they were? Do you think that if they gave up 52 points to Alabama, even if they scored points, and again, it never seemed for most of the time that the game was in doubt, I guess. I didn't watch it, but it was 35-17 at one point, and then it got close, and then Alabama went up, 45-31, and then it got close again. The point is, would they have been given the benefit of the doubt? No, it's very likely they would not have been. So let's just apply the same standard to everybody and not make this essentially act like G5 is a separate subdivision of FBS, and it just doesn't. There's just nothing they can do to crack this thing, and that's what I think we're talking about here, Dan.
That coming here from the commissioner this morning of the American Athletic Conference, Mike Aresco. Mike, I did this crazy thing when the College Football Playoff Committee made their decisions. I did this really weird thing, which is called listening. And when I listened to every word that was said by the chairman on why Ohio State was chosen, he said they were chosen for these reasons. And this is not a knock on Ohio State. It's just this is what he said. He said, here are the reasons why Ohio State was chosen. They won their conference championship game. They beat 2 teams ranked in the nation's top 25, and they went undefeated. I sat here and said to myself, wow, it's really crazy that also in the same state of Ohio, there's a team called Cincinnati who won their conference championship game, also beat 2 top 25 ranked teams, actually 3 top 25 ranked teams.
Dan, I think it's even, I don't mean to correct you, but I think if you look at teams that they played who were in the top 25, it's probably 4 or 5. It's definitely UCF. It's definitely Army. I think it's definitely Memphis at the very beginning of the season. I think it's certainly Tulsa. That's 4 right there, and there might be a 5th one somewhere. So it's even more because I count when, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I count when you played them. Were they in the top 20 or were they in the top 25 at any point in the season? Because as you know, teams come in and out of the top 25. So I think, they beat 2 top 25 teams. Well, they said the same thing about Iowa State, but I made the point, again, not to knock Texas, but does anybody really realistically believe that if they didn't have Texas on their name, that they would have been a top 25 team at 6-3 with questions about the coach, who actually is an old friend of mine, and I am glad he's staying on. But the fact is they could have been 5-4, but for an onside kick against Texas Tech. Does anybody think that team in our league would be, with the Big 12 having lost those 3 games to the Sun Belt, does anybody think that team would have been in the top 25? Yet they get credit for that. They get credit for beating a West Virginia team that was 5-4, 4-4 after they played them, and was 6th in the Big 12. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just think that's the kind of thing we're dealing with. But you're absolutely right. Please, continue. I apologize for the interruption. I just wanted to get that in there.
No, and I can appreciate that. I mean, it's sitting here and listening to reasoning for one, what's good for the goose is supposed to be good for the gander. That's how it should be. But to say, okay, well, Ohio State won their conference championship. They beat a couple top 25 ranked teams and they went undefeated. And I sat here and said, okay, well, Cincinnati won their conference championship. They beat top 25 teams, more than 2 actually, and they went undefeated. The difference between the 2 of them is Ohio State's name and Cincinnati's name. But Cincinnati also played double the season that Ohio State played. So there's this thought of, okay, so they're 9-0, they're going toward 10 games and whatnot, and here's Ohio State that's played 6, and then they go, well, Cincinnati missed a couple games. So did Ohio State. Well, they didn't play for a certain amount of time. So did Ohio State.
Ohio State missed 3 of their 8 games.
Right.
Cincinnati missed 2 games.
So when you break it down and you look at, here are all the reasons why we chose Ohio State, and here are the things we didn't hold against them, they're conversely the reasons why Cincinnati wasn't even thought of and they hold things against them. So all I can say is when you answer a question, you should probably think about your answer, because the direct answer to the question of why Ohio State, not just Ohio State, but why 3, not even 4, why did they not even barely made it? They made it, above Notre Dame. To answer the question and say these are the 3 pillars of why we chose them, knowing that Cincinnati did the exact same thing, potentially even more so, and then you look at the schedule of Ohio State and say, and I agree with you, 4 out of the 6 teams that they beat doesn't even matter, not even ranked teams. Indiana, they barely got out alive. In Northwestern, they didn't destroy them. They won by 12. So,
well, not only did they win by 12, they were losing 10-6 in the second half. Northwestern was on the move and unfortunately had a really bad interception, in the end zone, or could have taken a 2-score lead. That game was close, and it's not as though this was a dominant team there, because it's got the name on it, and they've had their issues. Everybody has. But the committee overlooks that, didn't overlook the issue with Cincinnati. Cincinnati hadn't played in a little while. They had some rust. They play a really tough team, very good, tough physical team in the rain in really atrocious conditions. And they, Tulsa makes some great plays at the end to tie the game. I mean, that long pass with the 2 defenders right on the guy, what a tremendous play that was. And then the touchdown pass, well covered, great play. But Cincinnati comes back, and Desmond Howard engineers a tremendous drive in the toughest conditions and under the toughest pressure, and they win the game. And no credit for it. They beat Tulsa, and that's what really bothers me, Dan.
Well, yeah, and I think the thing is, and it happened earlier on in the season when Tulsa had defeated UCF. And UCF just went from, I think, 12 in the rankings or something like that, and then disappeared. And
never got back, right. And by the way, had a good season, lost 3 games by a grand total of 12 points against our 3 best teams.
And when that happened, I spoke with Philip Montgomery about it, and he goes, he's like, I take that as disrespect. He's like, we do that, and it's like, oh, UCF lost to Tulsa, well, that's terrible, take them out. And he's like, you know what? How did we deserve that? How do we earn that, essentially? And I'm paraphrasing, but the reality of it all there is a giant, and I think, we're talking about it with Ohio State and Cincinnati up against each other, saying these are the reasons why we let Ohio State in, but Cincinnati did the same thing, arguably better. So that's going to hit. What else is going to hit is just the reality of UCF has dealt with it, and I know that you have, spoken about UCF, and I think people that are Cincinnati fans and fans of the American or fans of UCF need to understand something. You came on my show and specifically talked about the egregious offensive things that happened toward UCF at a time where they went 25-0 in a span where they lost an entire coaching staff, got a new one, and continued to win. And their only loss within that period was without Mackenzie Milton, their starting quarterback, in a game against against LSU. And everybody wanted to say, well, LSU didn't have this guy, and this guy playing. Well, guess what? UCF didn't have their Heisman hopeful playing. So,
which is the biggest, most important position on the team,
right.
And changed. We would have won that game, I think, easily with Mackenzie Milton on the field.
And you lost the game by 8. It's not. You didn't lose the game by 40. You didn't lose the game, going away. It was actually a game. And shout out to the team for what they were able to do to make it a game. But the thing is, they go to their third string quarterback, and they're still doing well. Dylan Gabriel and. But the reality is, Mike, that when we look at the American Athletic Conference, I see talent. I see guys that are going to the NFL. I see coaches that know how to coach. I see a lot of great things happening. But the frustration that I have with this is the fact that no matter what these teams do, UCF wins and wins and wins and wins, and everybody goes, oh, that's not a good win. They're not in a good conference. Oh, we don't respect them. Oh, that's not a top team. Oh, it wasn't Alabama. Oh, it wasn't Clemson. And then as soon as they get one loss, everybody goes, see, I told you they stink. And that doesn't happen with Clemson. That doesn't happen with Alabama. That doesn't happen with Ohio State. That doesn't happen with Notre Dame. When Notre Dame made the college football playoff, not this time, but last time, when they made it, they had defeated a Syracuse team that was unranked and was out without their starting quarterback. That's the only team they blew out. as well as Florida State, who wasn't good, and we know that they haven't been good for the last few years here. Those were the only two blowouts. They barely beat Ball State. They barely beat Vanderbilt. But because of the name Notre Dame, you go 12-0. And what the committee has essentially done, and I want to see what your angle is on this, your thoughts are. What the committee has essentially said is, every year that Notre Dame goes undefeated, they'll be in the discussion, which is a very slippery slope. The other thing that they have said against the American is, well, the conference isn't tough enough. Well, we don't consider this talent tough enough. Notre Dame doesn't have a conference outside of this year. So there's all of these special rules going on, and every time they say, well, UCF, you can't get in because your conference, but Notre Dame doesn't have one. Well, Cincinnati, you got to do these three things that Ohio State did. Well, you did them. Well, it doesn't matter. Double standards are all over this college football playoff committee. Yet here we sit today, and we've talked about UCF, and we've talked about Cincinnati, and I've seen the Houstons, and I've seen the Memphises do what they have done, and yet here we are this morning saying what's good for the goose is absolutely positively, for whatever reason, not good for the gander.
Well, Dan, I think that's well put, and you would expect me to agree, but I think you've made legitimate points. It's not just me. Others have said these kinds of things. I can point out a couple of things along the lines of what you said. When I don't know whether it was the year Notre Dame got in the playoff or not. It may have been. Was it 2018? I don't remember. And they lost to Clemson 30-3. I think it was. They beat Pittsburgh 19-14, and I think it was at home. UCF beat Pittsburgh 45-14. And it was 45-7, but for a very late, meaningless touchdown by Pitt. And Mackenzie Milton said, "We're better." And okay, compare those two scores. It was a boat race, as they say. And yet Notre Dame squeaks by Pitt. Just like the year that Houston in 2015, I referenced, Houston beat Vanderbilt 34-0, totally dismantled them. Vanderbilt went into the swamp and lost on a late field goal to Florida 9-7. They were leading 7-6 and lost on a late field goal. Think about that. That same Vanderbilt team got totally destroyed by Houston. Didn't matter. Committee didn't care. They didn't want to compare scores and say, wow, that Houston team's pretty good. And when Houston played in the Peach Bowl against a number 8 or 9 ranked Florida State, which had lost a very tough game on the road at Clemson, and Clemson, I think, went to the playoff that year and ended up in the national championship game. Then, of course, Houston's going to lose, big favorite, Florida State. Well, Houston was ahead 21-3 at the half and won by 2 touchdowns. And it was no fluke when you look at all the great players they had. But this committee is supposed to be a series of football experts. I've programmed football for 30 years, 35 years, whatever it's been, between ESPN and ABC. ESPN. I really didn't do it for ABC. I did it for ESPN, and then I did it for CBS. And I programmed everybody in college football, and then at CBS it was primarily the SEC. And I know college football. You know college football. I've watched it since I was a little kid. I love the sport, one of my favorite sports. It's become probably my favorite sport in many respects. College football and basketball are two of my favorite sports. And, I think I look at this and I say, well, I can look at all these different things. I can compare scores. I can compare results. I knew that UCF had a good team in 17 and had a lot of great players and could play competitively. When Baylor played UCF back in 13, they had us all convinced it was going to be a 40-something blowout. Nobody could stop Baylor's offense. They ripped through the Big 12. And UCF had Blake Bortles and Storm Johnson, a bunch of other great receivers too, as well as Storm as a running back. And look what happened in that game. And it opened your eyes. It wasn't even close. I mean, they just kept piling it on. They ended up with 52 points. And so I've seen the results, and yet, you don't seem to get credit for it. In addition, it's amazing this league has done as well as it's done when, the door to the playoff is closed, and you can tell recruits, if you're a P5, well, don't go to a G5 school. They have no chance to go to the playoff, and so you'll never be on the so-called big stage and blah, blah, blah. So we have to recruit differently, and we recruit extremely well. We're getting much better players. It's a great league. It's a league that's gained respect. We've got coaches in this league who happen to know something about the P5. Luke Fickell coached Ohio State, and Dana Holgerson was in the Big 12 for how many years, and Sonny Dykes was in the P5 and coached at Cal, and they know how good the league is. And Tommy Tuberville said to me at one point several years ago when he was coaching Cincinnati, he said, players aren't different here. He said, we've got great players here. And he coached Auburn, and he coached at the very highest level. Auburn could have won the national championship, but for the fact that they couldn't get into the playoffs because of the BCS. And, Tommy's now a U.S. He'll be a U.S. senator, and he said, good players here. I don't notice a difference. And, that's what we're up against. The other thing is I've never touted our teams when I didn't think they were necessarily playoff worthy. And that doesn't mean that they weren't good. Now, last year, Memphis was a good team. And by the way, they played toe-to-toe with Penn State in that bowl game. Anybody who watched that bowl game knew that they belonged on the same field. They could have won the game. It was 45-39 with a key third down play. That give Penn State credit. They made the play and then went on to score. It was 38-36, late in the third quarter. And then there was a turnover. And they played without their right tackle and their great tight end, Joey Magnifico. Both of them had played the whole season, but for some, they had injuries and could not play that game. And believe me, had they played, the 6 field goals that Riley Patterson kicked, which is pretty remarkable, might have been 3 of those, 4 of them might have been touchdowns, and who knows. But the point is, they went toe-to-toe with the Penn State team that clearly was in playoff consideration last year. Right, they clearly would have been in the playoff consideration and lost that tough game to up at Minnesota. So we've been able to stand our ground with anyone, and I expect Cincinnati, Georgia to be a good game. That'll be a very tough game because Georgia's much better now with JT Daniels playing quarterback. That's a tough test for Cincinnati. They will not shrink from that test. They'll face it just like all our teams have, but. Last year, Memphis had clearly had a loss to Temple, and clearly Cincinnati had a loss. It wasn't like they had lost to Ohio State last year. They weren't going to be in the playoff, and I wasn't out there saying they should be in the playoff because they're one-loss teams, and you put a lot of one-loss teams in. I could have said that, but you want to maintain credibility, and I thought last year, okay, we're probably not in the playoff hunt. Do I think our teams necessarily need to go undefeated to be in the playoff? No, I don't believe so, but everybody else does. The committee certainly does. If you're not undefeated, you don't even have a shot to be in the committee's top 10 if you're in our league. But with these other teams, you can have 2 losses and 3 losses and easily be in the top 10. No problem at all because you're G5. And it doesn't matter who you played either. You can play an LSU team that has the great name, but everybody knows it was a team that was completely depleted. And, you can beat them or lose to them and no problem. You're not going to drop. So again, let's just look at the facts. Let's just look at the reality of this situation. And, I didn't, Houston probably in 2016 would have had a claim to the playoff because they soundly beat a top Oklahoma team, was 3 at the time, stopped Baker Mayfield cold, beat Louisville, which was, I think, 5th in the country at the time, 36-10, 31-0 at the half. Sacked Lamar Jackson, another Heisman winner, 10 times. But they did not, they stumbled in our conference, which shows that the conference had some tough competition, and so they were not ultimately, I didn't think, they were a playoff team, and so I didn't tout them, even though I could have said at one point they had 2 losses, but look at their wins. But the teams that have 2 losses, just, if you're in a P5, you're fine. In our league, you're not. Even if you've beaten teams like, Louisville and Oklahoma in the same year. And so I couldn't really, tout them for the playoff. So you try to maintain credibility. But when we've had elite teams like these UCF teams, if that Houston team had gone undefeated, certainly would have had a shot. Probably, I kind of wonder now whether they would have really had a shot based on what's been happening. And then, you have the situation this year, which I think brought it to a head. So that's where we are, Dan. And, I don't know where it's going. I do think it might get solved eventually if this playoff expands. And this, ironically, is probably a good reason to expand the playoff. There's no question that there'll be talk about it. It's on the back burner right now, but it'll come back once the pandemic goes away. And I think our goal then would shift to being an automatic qualifier as opposed to having to fight with a group of P5 teams when I think our conference is tougher. And Cincinnati, if Tulsa had won this game, Cincinnati would not, even though with one loss and having a great season, probably wouldn't have ended up on New Year's Day. It would have probably been Coastal Carolina because they were undefeated. I think would Cincinnati win that game if they played? I think so, but that's just my opinion. Some people might have a different opinion. Remember, Houston was a middle-level team in our conference, and you know what happened when they played Cincinnati. But yet they were beating BYU 26-14 in the second half, and they were leading 26-21 in the fourth quarter, and it was a three-point game with 3 minutes left. And again, that was the BYU, and that's the BYU team that, had that close loss to Coastal Carolina. So do I think a Cincinnati team, healthy and in their normal rhythm would have a pretty good shot in a game like that? Yeah, but I don't know that the committee's looking at it the way we are. And that's, we just have to keep fighting, Dan, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, coming from the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, Mike Aresco. Mike, before I let you go, what is the answer? You're out there, talking points that make sense. You and I don't discuss before the show me saying, hey, Mike, have this, and this. Like when I say to you what I'm saying, you don't know what I'm going to ask. You have no idea what I'm going to say. And you don't give me 1 or 2 points. You got 12, 13, 14. You're rattling these things off. They say beat the SEC, you've done it. They say beat the Big 12, you've done it. They say beat the Pac-12, you've done it. They say beat the ACC, you've done it. They say go undefeated, you've done it. They say, recruit well, send guys to the NFL, you've done it. I mean, over and over and over again, you're hitting all the pillars of being asked to hit. And when they turn around and tell you about the rankings, this is what gets me. You don't have control over the rankings. The Associated Press has it, the coaches have it, and at the end of the day, the College Football Playoff Committee has it. You have no control over the rankings. So for them to say, well, you got to stay in the top 5, that's up to them. Well, you got to stay in the top 10, that's up to them. And so there's a couple final pieces I want to get to, but I have to ask you this question. How do you fight the rankings battle when you're not in control of the rankings? The things you are in control of, like I just mentioned, that which you are in control of, you have taken care of. That which you are not in control of, the rankings, you can't do anything about that but hope. When you go undefeated, when your team plays well, how does it feel to have the Big Ten, as an example, this year, not even be playing for 4 weeks, and Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Wisconsin, all ranked, Minnesota, all ranked in the nation's top 25, taking up spots in the top 25 at 0-0. Michigan rose 4 spots from 1 week to the next, having not even played a game. Yet Cincinnati consistently dropped in the college football playoff rankings for winning. How does that make sense?
Well, it doesn't. And look, I thought that the polls were silly to include teams that hadn't even played it down. And Big 12, by the way, didn't play for basically almost 2 months. Excuse me, the Big 10, rather. I'm sorry. Didn't play for almost 2 months. And the Pac-12 didn't even start till, and they did seem to be penalized to some degree. But obviously the Big 10 was not. But both of them missed essentially half the season in terms of real time. And then Ohio State misses 3 of its 8 games and doesn't play a stellar schedule, but no problem. It's not a problem, but it is a problem for Cincinnati. Now, Cincinnati has a lot of NFL players on the roster. They're going to have guys playing on Sunday who are good players. And, I don't know that matters. What is very discouraging right now is that I thought public opinion's been galvanized. Media opinion has been almost universal, and it hasn't affected this committee at all. And the proof is this week when they doubled down on what they were doing. Because Oklahoma State narrowly beats Iowa State, but they have 2 losses also, and one of them is not a good one. They jump over Cincinnati. They did the exact same thing that everybody was criticizing them for 2 weeks. So even though I thought that bringing media pressure to bear would make a difference, that would have some impact. And we've had a chance to talk to the committee reps and told them exactly what I've been telling you. And that didn't seem ultimately to matter. It just didn't. So, that's what's frustrating. And I don't know what can change that.
How did they respond when you got to speak with them? Not to interrupt.
Oh, they all said the right things. Yeah, we'll convey those things to the committee, and we'll, we really respect your league. You got a great league. Yeah, well, to me, it's just lip service now, because they clearly don't, and they say that, but the actions speak, as you know, much louder than words. So we'll see, Dan. I've got to run, but I appreciate, as usual, Dan, the time and effort. And you're right. I don't get your questions in advance. I don't know what you're going to ask me. But you know our league. You've watched us. And you're fair-minded. And we've had other commentators, other observers, other writers who have been very fair to us. And when we're not good, we say we're not good. And but this league has been good. This league has always had really good teams throughout. I mean, really good teams, right from the very beginning, right from the time we reinvented the league in 2013 with UCF, which won a game at Penn State on the road and won a game at Louisville, come from behind victory to essentially a one-loss Louisville team that year. And the year before had gone to the Sugar Bowl, and sure enough, it didn't really get any respect, even though there was no playoff at the time. We had an automatic bid, but everybody thought they'd be destroyed in their Fiesta Bowl game, and of course you saw what happened. They almost beat South Carolina that year. South Carolina escaped, and I remember Steve Spurrier may have said, I don't know, I want to play here again. It was a tough game, and so that's the only loss they had all year. That was a really good team, but they didn't get the respect either. So this league's been good from the very get-go. And in 2014, we had tri-champions, and we had a close loss in Ireland by UCF on a last-second Penn State field goal. And then we had a Memphis team that lost by 7 out at UCLA, and lost a tough game at Ole Miss when they were really good, and lost one game in the conference and didn't end up getting the New Year's Day bid and should have, and then beat BYU, a really good BYU in the bowl game. And I'll close. I do have to run, I'm sorry, but I'll close by just saying, look, this isn't a new story for Cincinnati. This has been something that's been in the making now for a few years. They've won 11 games the previous 2 years. They beat Virginia Tech in a bowl game 2 years ago. They beat BC badly in a bowl game last year, 34-6, and it wasn't even that close. They went out and they beat UCLA 2 years in a row. They went out and beat them a couple of years ago in the Rose Bowl, beat them last year at home, and the score wasn't the game wasn't as close as the final score. It's not like Cincinnati hasn't done this, and they're just an outstanding team, and we'll just keep fighting, Dan. That's all you can do. That's all you can do. You just make your points. If you think you've made them legitimately, that's really all you can do.
That coming from Mike Aresco, the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference. Times need to change. It looks like the expansion is inevitable, and if in this case with the Big 12 and the Pac-12 and other places that might feel disrespected at this point, maybe that helps out the American in a greater discussion with a group of people coming together and a group of conferences coming together saying enough is enough. Mike, as always, I appreciate your time. I know you spent a lot of time with us here this morning. I know we got a lot of reasons, and it sounds like something that makes a lot of sense going into a system that doesn't. So got to find a way to get out of this one with some positivity and some fairness. And I wish you, as always, a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. And I thank you for being a part of the show as you always have been. And I look forward to talking with you very soon. And hopefully things will get better. But I know that these teams have bowl games, and I know that they'll show up. So Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and thank you for what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Dan. I hope you and your family and all your listeners have a happy and a safe holiday. I hope these vaccines are around the corner. They appear to be, and I think maybe we can finally put this behind us. It's been a challenging year, but I hope, again, you and yours and everybody listening has a great holiday season and stays well. That's the key thing. And thanks again, as usual, Dan, for having me and letting me talk about some of the issues, with our conference. Always much appreciated, and appreciate you and what you do for the sport and your knowledge that you always bring to this, and your goodwill. I think you're fair-minded, and that's important. So thanks again, and have a great holiday season.
All right, Mike, take care. I'll talk to you soon.
So long, Dan. See ya.
That coming from Mike Aresco here on Wake Up Call with Dan Tortora, where sports truly meets life. Hanging out here with us this morning, the